I don't think my films are in the same range as Bruce's. Bruce's films were primarily.
As a young stuntman, he worked on two of Bruce Lee's films.
Bruce Lee once said, "Being fast isn't about moving quickly, it's about moving correctly." 5 years after his death, those words were put to the test. In October 1978, the legendary Joe Louis stood before his students, dismissing Bruce's philosophy as nothing more than movie tricks and slow, outdated forms. The air in the dojo grew heavy with doubt. But then, a figure stepped quietly from the shadows, Chuck Norris, Bruce's closest friend and sparring partner. What followed was not just a challenge between two champions, it was a clash of ideas, a battle of legacies, and a moment that proved Bruce Lee's wisdom still lived on. The year was 1978. The South Bay Dojo in Los Angeles was alive with the steady rhythm of disciplined breath, the faint hum of traffic outside, and the silent anticipation of young students eager to learn from one of the greatest fighters of their era. Joe Louis, towering in presence and reputation, stood before them. At 34, he was already a living legend, kickboxing champion, Marine veteran, and a man hailed as the Muhammad Ali of karate. On that autumn afternoon, Louis spoke with conviction. He warned against being dazzled by Hollywood illusions and dismissed Bruce's celebrated methods as impractical in real combat. His words cut sharp. Flashy Wing Chun traps, flowing movements, even the famous one-inch punch. He called them clever tricks, not tools for victory. His students shifted uneasily, some nodding, others unsure. What they didn't know was that history itself was about to walk through the back door. Because while Louis lectured, a figure entered quietly. Chuck Norris, calm, composed, carrying the weight of a friendship with Bruce Lee that was built on sweat, trust, and countless hours of sparring. Louis was about to learn that Bruce Lee's legacy could not be mocked without consequences, and when Chuck stepped forward, the entire dojo held its breath. Joe Louis's voice carried authority as he paced before the mats, his steps heavy, his words sharper than the strikes he was famous for. He declared, "Real fighting isn't about fancy philosophy, it's about speed, power, and hitting first." His hands cut through the air in mocking demonstrations of Bruce Lee's Jeet Kune, gestures that drew nervous chuckles from some students but silent unease from others. He dismissed Bruce's methods as relics of another time, meditation, interception, flowing movement. He said they were beautiful to watch, but useless when a fighter could deliver 3 kicks before his opponent thought of one. The students listened, caught between awe for their teacher and doubt about the words aimed at a man they'd only known as a legend on screen. From the back, Chuck Norris remained quiet. His eyes followed every word, every mocking gesture. He had trained with Bruce Lee, exchanged blows, shared ideas about combat that went beyond the surface. To him, Bruce was not just a movie star, he was one of the most complete martial artists the world had ever seen. Louis had no idea he was being watched, no idea the next voice in the room would challenge everything he had just said. And when Chuck finally spoke, the room's energy shifted in an instant. The dojo fell silent as a calm but firm voice broke through Joe Louis's lecture. "Interesting perspective, Joe." Every head turned. Chuck Norris had stepped out of the shadows, his expression unreadable, his presence instantly commanding attention. For a split second, Louis's confidence wavered. His grin returned quickly, but the students noticed the shift. "Chuck," he said, tone lighter, as though greeting an old sparring partner, "just telling these kids the truth about fighting." Norris nodded slowly, his blue eyes fixed on the students rather than Louis. "Truth," he replied evenly. "Bruce Lee wasn't about looking good on camera. He was about understanding combat at its deepest level." The air thickened. Louis crossed his arms. "Philosophy doesn't stop a punch. Being faster does." His words were direct, but the edge in his voice betrayed unease. Norris did not flinch. Speed without purpose is wasted. Bruce knew the timing. He knew distance. He knew the intention. That's why he never had to be the quickest man in the room, because he was already in the place you didn't expect him to be. The students' gazes swung back and forth between them, like spectators at a match they never imagined witnessing. Whispers rose and fell, anticipation buzzing across the mats. Lewis smirked, unwilling to concede ground. "So you're saying Bruce's flow beats raw aggression. You and I both know in the ring, the man who strikes first wins." Norris took a step forward, calm but unyielding. "Then why don't we put it to the test?" A ripple of shock passed through the room. The champion who mocked Bruce Lee and the friend who carried his philosophy were about to collide. And as mats were cleared, every student realized they were about to witness history. The mats were pulled aside, clearing a square in the center of the dojo. The room buzzed with an energy that was almost unbearable. Whispers flew, students whispering about what they were about to see. Joe Louis, the man whose speed had destroyed countless opponents, facing Chuck Norris, the quiet strategist who carried Bruce Lee's legacy in his bones. Mike Stone, another champion who happened to be training that day, stepped forward to act as referee. He looked at both men, then at the crowd. 3 rounds, light contact, mouth guards only. His words fell heavy, sealing the unspoken pact. Lewis bounced on his toes, stretching his arms, eyes sharp with determination. His posture radiated the eagerness of a predator about to strike. He wanted to prove his words weren't just bravado. Norris, by contrast, stood still, breathing steady, eyes closed for a moment, centering himself with the calm Bruce had always preached. The difference between them was striking. Raw aggression on one side, composed readiness on the other. When the signal came, Lewis launched forward instantly. His kicks blurred, slicing through the air with frightening velocity. Students gasped, their eyes struggling to follow the motion. But Chuck wasn't there. He shifted just enough, as if the storm of attacks passed through empty space. And when Norris reappeared in Lewis's blind spot, the entire dojo leaned forward, waiting for the first decisive strike. Lewis attacked with a fury that had earned him titles across the globe. His legs snapped like whips, combinations of lightning-fast kicks aimed at Chuck's ribs, chest, and head. The sheer speed left after-images across the students' eyes. Gasps filled the room. This was the Joe Louis they had heard about, the unstoppable force who demolished anyone who stood in his path. But Norris didn't meet force with force. He shifted with precision of a chess master, stepping inches out of reach, letting strikes cut through nothing but air. When punches followed, his hands barely moved, subtle deflections guiding them away as though Lewis was fighting smoke. Frustration built in Lewis's face. "You're just running," he barked between strikes, trying to bait his opponent. Norris did not answer. Instead, he timed his movement perfectly. As Lewis committed to another flurry, Norris glided forward, slipping past the storm. A controlled tap landed on Lewis's midsection. Another featherlight touch grazed his temple. No power, but perfect accuracy. The room froze. Everyone understood. Those strikes, had Norris chosen to follow through, could have ended the fight instantly. Lewis stepped back, breath heavier now, eyes burning with something new, not anger, but dawning respect. And as the referee called time on the first round, every student realized they were witnessing more than a spar. They were watching 2 philosophies collide head-on.
The second round began with a different rhythm. Lewis was no longer smiling. His jaw tightened, his movements sharper, his attacks heavier. He had felt Norris's precision and knew he needed more than speed to break through. This time, he mixed his blinding kicks with grappling attempts, trying to trap his opponent, to use raw strength to control the pace. Norris responded like water finding its course. When Lewis pushed forward, he yielded just enough. When grabbed, he rotated, redirecting force instead of resisting it. Students watching couldn't believe their eyes. Norris wasn't stopping Lewis head-on, he was guiding him into emptiness. Every move seemed to turn Lewis's aggression against himself. Then came the moment everyone waited for. Lewis spun into a heel kick, one of his trademark strikes, a move that had ended careers. His timing was flawless, his foot slicing through the air with lethal precision. The room gasped, convinced Chuck would finally be caught. But Norris wasn't where the kick landed. He had stepped along the very arc of the strike, moving not away, but around. As Lewis completed his spin, he found Norris standing behind him, calmed, unshaken, a single hand poised at vital targets. And when the referee's voice declared, "Point Norris," the dojo erupted because the impossible had just been made real. Lewis stood in the center of the mat, shoulders rising with each breath. His power had filled the room moments earlier, but now silence pressed down like a weight. Across from him, Norris remained steady, posture loose, eyes calm, carrying no signs of strain. Before the referee could signal another exchange, Norris lifted his hand. "Joe," he said quietly, "do you really believe Bruce Lee was slow?" His tone was not mocking, only certain. Lewis blinked, taken off guard. "I never fought him. I only saw his films, his demonstrations." Norris stepped closer, voice clear enough for everyone present. "I trained with him. I know what he carried. He wasn't chasing speed. He was chasing truth. He once told me, if you understand distance, timing, and intent, you never need to be faster. You simply need to arrive where your opponent least expects you." The words hung in the air like a lesson none had ever heard before. Students leaned forward, absorbing every syllable. Even Lewis, the fighter known for unmatched explosiveness, found himself listening more than resisting. His mind replayed every strike he had thrown in the past minutes and realized none had landed. Norris's eyes didn't leave him. "So, Joe, ask yourself this. What's the value of speed if it never finds its target?" And as those words sank in, the dojo braced for an answer that could change everything.
The once unyielding champion stood frozen, Norris's words echoing louder than any strike. Joe Louis had built his reputation on speed, aggression, and overwhelming force. Yet in 2 short rounds, every principle he lived by had been dismantled, not through brute power, but through calm precision. He wiped sweat from his brow, searching for words, but none carried the certainty of moments before. The students who once looked to him for answers now waited for his response with silent anticipation. For the first time, the great Joe Louis was not a teacher in control. He was a student confronting truth. His voice came low, almost reluctant. "None of my blows touched you." The realization cracked the air. He admitted what everyone had seen with their own eyes. Norris said nothing. His silence forced Louis to keep speaking. "And you never had to move at full capacity to stop me." His tone was half awe, half regret. He turned toward the young martial artists swashing, faces glowing with both shock and admiration. The man who had dismissed Bruce Lee's teachings now felt the weight of them pressing on his chest. Joe Louis lowered his head. "Maybe I've misunderstood what real mastery looks like." And as those words left his lips, every person in the dojo leaned closer, waiting to see if pride would give way to transformation. Louis raised his head, his eyes sweeping across the students who had hung on his every statement earlier.
Now his tone carried none of the old bravado. "I spoke as if Bruce Lee's way was for show," he said, voice steady but heavy. "But today I see his vision was not weak. It was strength on a level I could not grasp." The students shifted, realizing they were witnessing not just a fight, but a moment of humility from a man known for never backing down. He continued, "Fighting isn't about throwing the most or being the quickest. It's about understanding, awareness, control. That's why Bruce's style endures even after his passing." He paused, glancing at Norris with a look of respect rarely seen in combat circles. "Chuck, I owe you for reminding me. And I owe Bruce for showing the world that martial arts is more than a contest of force." Then he turned to his class, his voice rising with conviction. "Don't be trapped by one method. Explore, combine, find your own expression. That's what Bruce lived for, and that's what I failed to see." Norris placed a hand on his shoulder, a quiet gesture that spoke louder than words. And just when the room felt complete resolution, Norris leaned closer, ready to share something Bruce had once told him in private. The dojo seemed suspended in silence, every breath held as Chuck Norris leaned closer. His voice dropped, steady but filled with memory. "He once told me," he said, "the ultimate goal of martial arts isn't victory. It's self-knowledge. If you conquer yourself, no opponent can truly defeat you." The student sat transfixed, the words cutting deeper than any strike. Even Joe Louis, who minutes earlier had dismissed Bruce's philosophy, now stood as if hearing scripture. The great fighter who believed only in speed and force bowed his head, no longer as a champion, but as a learner, humbled before truth. Norris straightened, his presence filling the room without needing to move. That's why Bruce endures. He didn't just create a style, he left a way of seeing. That's something time can't erase. Louis turned slowly, looking at the young martial artists who had witnessed his struggle, his defeat, his awakening. "Remember this moment, because Bruce Lee's legacy doesn't live in movies. It lives in you, if you choose to carry it forward." The mats were cleared, the crowd dispersed, yet the weight of the lesson remained. Two champions had entered as rivals in thought, but walked away as students of a man who had already left the world. And as the lights dimmed in that quiet Los Angeles dojo, one question lingered. If Bruce Lee had lived longer, how much further would he have reshaped the art of combat and the very way we see ourselves?